In this demonstration, we're going to take a look at how Gluware can automate security response as part of the Cloud Security Notification Showcase here at ONUG Spring 2020. Just looking at the setup here, what you're going to see from the other presentations in this segment is they're going to be talking about the CSNF actual message handling coming up from the clouds, public clouds, and what they're doing with the metadata and other things that they're tagging on that messaging to identify if there's a security issue. What Gluware is focused on here is in the red box highlighted here, which is programmatic interaction with the CSNF framework, or birthday cake, so to speak, where Gluware can be programmatically called. In this case, we're being called by Microsoft Sentinel, and we can perform an automated security response. So some of the things we can do are we can drift and or perform an audit on the network. We can automate a security change related to limiting a bad actor or performing a segmentation or an isolation. So just one more quick slide, or actually two more. In terms of the visibility here, Gluware is at the automation orchestration layer. We're automating the network layer, including the WAN, the data center, and the cloud. In this case, the demonstration was with AWS. And we are being API integrated with Microsoft's Sentinel, which is performing an API called a trigger Gluware to perform the automated response. And one other quick note is that in Microsoft Azure Sentinel product, we're just inserting an API call to call Gluware programmatically. So with that, let's jump into the live demo portion of this. Okay, here we are in the Gluware instance, and I'm going to kind of skip right into the demo here about what we're doing with the CSNF. So we're at the dashboard here. I'm going to navigate into the new Gluware Network RPA and go into the workflow library. In the workflow library is where you manage your process automation, and you can see as it progresses through the status of test to production, and you can move back into edit and other functions. So let's jump into the process automation here. Okay, so for this demo, I'm going to go back and edit this particular workflow that's in a test state. So I'll go and edit to show you the workflow that we're stepping through. So here we are in the workflow editor, and this is the drag and drop canvas that you just drag your tasks over, either the native Gluware tasks or third-party tasks. Like in this example, we're using one from StackStorm, a third-party library of integrations. So just kind of quickly describing the workflow that we're doing is we're looking at the network devices first, when we're looking at a subsegment of them by filtering them. We're then performing a capture of the configuration that's running. We're going to then compare the snapshots. So this is the drift to see, if you have a security condition like a breach, you want to know, did any bad actors affect my network or make changes? So we're going to run a drift detection, and then we have a logical operator here, and we're going to say if config drift equals no, you proceed down this path. If it's yes or else, it will proceed down this path. And so what we're doing is we're inserting notifications. So for no drift, you'll get an email, and we're pulling in the workflow name and the device names. On this other path, you're going to get a workflow that drift was detected, and then we're going to follow that up with a provision of the devices that would match that. So we will re-provision the devices here and essentially get a good config back on them. The logic will then join here, and then we're going to run an audit policy. So we're auditing to ensure we remain compliant. This is another layer of security, which is maintaining compliance to your well-known standards. So the policy I'm running is called a Cisco standard audit config for the Cisco devices that are in this test bed. Then you hit the logic again, and so if my audit fails, I'm going to notify that there's been violations, and then we're going to intervene. After you've already provisioned devices, and if you haven't drifted, you shouldn't have an audit violation, but it's possible. So then the final act, and maybe one of the most interesting for this demo, is that we have a task here to create a network ACL entry. So in this case, we're hard coding the address to block on an inbound filter. However, in a subsequent demo, we'll be passing in a variable and then dynamically assign it. But for now, in the state we're in with this particular demo, we're going to predetermine the so-called security action, augmenting the ACL, or kind of network lockdown or segmentation. You could do numerous things here, but in this case, in kind of a straightforward demo, we're just adding to an ACL. So once you're happy with your workflow, you save it, and then we're going to run validation. Validation makes sure that all of the tasks are configured properly. So validation's in passed here. Now we're going to run a test. So we're going to actually run the workflow. One quick note on that is that it will run against devices labeled as test devices. I happen to have my devices labeled as test and production. So let's go ahead and execute this workflow, and we'll go to the activity. So workflow activity view is where you see the status of all your workflows and what they're doing. I'm going to click on the log so I get a little bit more detail on this one that's running. And I'll just draw your attention up here where it says this drop down. Tasks is what we're interested in. The filtered task is complete. It just executed the capture of all those configurations. So 5 devices met the matching criteria. It is now comparing those devices. I can see this task here is now running. And as it runs, I'll also highlight you can drill down into the targets and actually get down into device level logging. So because Gluware is using our native stack that has the operating system adapters, and we're speaking native CLI, semantic, or API, you can get down and actually see the two-way communication that's taking place. So let's navigate back to the task level, because I can see my overall workflow has hit completed here in 51 seconds. I compared the snapshot, I've sent an email, I've run an audit policy. I don't see a provisioning, so I already know even from looking at this, I didn't have devices that failed my audit or that had a drift occur, and I can see the ACL task executed as well. So just drilling into that ACL task, as I mentioned, we're orchestrating on top of StackStorm. So I'll just navigate over to the StackStorm history, and I can see this latest entry was just added. So I know that, programmatically we talked to StackStorm, the job was executed. I also can navigate over to my AWS instance, and I'm looking at the inbound rules of my ACL here. I can refresh this display here, and I look down, and sure enough, that kind of hard-coded address that we're filtering has been added to the inbound filtering list. One last quick note, the way this is programmatically integrated with the CSNF is through API calls. So Gluware exposes a call to run to get the workflows that are available on the system, and of course you're authorizing those calls. And then we have the ability to then execute the call programmatically as well. So if I look at this particular call, it's running the workflow. I'm just going to put this workflow ID in here, execute that workflow, and I can see it's running. So if I navigate back over to the Gluware UI, and I can see that workflow is running again here. It's 10-11 seconds in, and so this is the way you would programmatically integrate Gluware into a system for security response, is to call the workflow programmatically, and in this case not passing variables yet, but we can move on to more advanced cases where we're doing things like that. And that concludes the demonstration.